clock on the wall reads 0342, and Hannah Voss is holding a paper cup of coffee that has gone cold in her hand. Before we go any further, if you want a new AI story every single night to fall asleep to, subscribe. One tap and a new story is waiting for you every evening. The cup is white. The coffee is the color of a wet road. There is a small crescent of lipstick on the rim from the sip she took an hour ago, when the night still felt ordinary. She has not lifted it since. On the screen in front of her, a number is climbing. It is the kind of number that should not climb. It is the kind of number that, in training, the instructors used to flash on the projector for 2 seconds and then shut off, because lingering on it was considered bad for morale. The number is a countdown. It reads 18 minutes. Then it reads 17 minutes and 59 seconds. Then it reads 17 minutes and 58 seconds. The room is cold. The room is always cold. Somewhere behind her, a vent hums the same hum it has hummed every night of her 3 years inside this mountain. The fluorescent bulb in the second row, third from the left, flickers the way it has flickered since the spring. Nobody has fixed it. Nobody has had time. Hannah does not move. Her hand is still wrapped around the cup. Her thumb is pressed against the seam where the paper folds over itself. She can feel that seam very clearly. She can feel her own pulse inside her thumb, ticking against the cardboard. Across the room, Major Reyes is speaking into a black phone. His voice is low and even. He is reading numbers off a sheet. He is reading them the way a man reads a grocery list to his wife, the way a teacher reads attendance. He has done this drill 1,000 times. He has never done this for real. On the main wall, 6 screens show 6 different feeds. One of them shows a face. The face is speaking. The face belongs to a man whose name Hannah has known since she was a child in a 4th grade classroom in Ohio. Watching him on a small television rolled in on a cart. The face is saying words. The words are the kind of words you do not unhear. Hannah knows the face. Hannah has watched the face for the last 40 seconds. And Hannah is the only person in the room who is looking at the corner of the screen, where a small green icon blinks twice and then turns yellow and then blinks twice again. The icon means the verification system is uncertain. The icon does not say what it is uncertain about. She sets the cup down. She sets it down very carefully on the laminate desk beside a yellow legal pad on which she has written nothing tonight. The pad is blank. The pen is uncapped. The pen has been uncapped since 02:15, when she sat down for her shift and poured the coffee that is now cold. A voice from the speaker overhead says something in the clipped grammar of the protocol. Another voice answers. A third voice asks a question that is meant to be a formality. The third voice receives the answer it expects. Somewhere down the corridor, a door opens, and a man in a dark uniform walks quickly past the glass, carrying a folder the color of dried blood. Hannah looks at the screen. The number reads 17 minutes and 12 seconds. She thinks very clearly of her mother's kitchen. She thinks of the yellow curtains. She thinks of the small ceramic rooster on the windowsill above the sink, the one her grandmother painted in 1974. She does not know why she thinks of these things. She only knows that her mind has opened a small door and walked through it, and behind the door is a kitchen in Ohio, and the kitchen is full of light. The icon in the corner of the screen blinks again. Yellow, yellow, yellow. She opens her mouth. She does not yet know what she is going to say. She only knows that there is something she has been trying to say for 3 weeks, in memos that were not answered, in meetings where she was thanked and dismissed, in a phone call to a colonel who told her kindly that the system had been tested. The number on the wall reads 17 minutes and 4 seconds. Hannah Voss draws a breath, and the story, for now, pauses there. Rewind with me, back away from the red phone and the 18 minutes, back through the corridor with the long fluorescent lights, back to a Tuesday in early March, 4 months before any of it happened. The town is Great Falls, Montana. The morning is cold. There is frost on the windshields and steam rising from the coffee shop on 10th Avenue. A woman in a navy blue uniform walks out with a paper cup in each hand. Her name is Hannah Voss. She is 31 years old. She is a first lieutenant in the United States Air Force, and she works at Malmstrom Air Force Base, 6 miles east of town. Hannah grew up in a small farming town in Iowa. Her father drove a school bus for 30 years. Her mother taught 4th grade. Hannah was the first in her family to go to college. She went on an ROTC scholarship because she wanted to fly. She did not end up flying. Her eyes were not quite good enough, so they put her in missile operations instead, and she told herself it was fine. It was important work. Someone had to do it. She has been at Malmstrom for 3 years. She lives in a small rented house on the north side of town with a gray cat named Pepper and a sourdough starter she keeps alive on the counter. She runs 4 miles every other morning along the river path. She calls her mother on Sundays. She watches old cooking shows when she can't sleep. Hannah works the night shift. She and her crew partner descend 60 feet into a hardened capsule below the Montana prairie. They sit at a console for 24 hours at a time. They monitor a flight of 10 intercontinental ballistic missiles spread across the wheat fields above them. Most nights, nothing happens. They drink coffee. They read paperbacks. They run procedural drills. The job is 99% boredom, and 1% the thing you do not let yourself think about. The base is quiet in March. The snow is still deep along the fence lines. The wind off the Rockies makes the flags snap. Hannah walks across the parking lot at 5:45 in the morning, hands the second coffee to her crew partner, Captain Daniel Ruiz, and they go through the security checks together. Badges, codes, the heavy elevator down. In the capsule, the consoles glow that particular shade of military green. There is a new monitor at the center of the desk that wasn't there a year ago. It is mounted in a clean black housing. The label on the bezel reads Sentinel. Underneath that, in smaller letters, it says Threat Fusion Interface, NORTHCOM. Sentinel was rolled out across the missile wings the previous fall. Hannah has been using it for 5 months now. It is, the trainers said, a force multiplier. It pulls in signals from satellites, from acoustic sensors, from intercepted communications, from open source video. It sorts through all of it. It flags what matters. It produces a clean morning briefing that arrives on the screen at exactly 6 a.m. local time. A summary, a threat level, a confidence score. The contractor that built Sentinel is a Virginia firm called Hellion Defense Analytics. Their advertising materials, the ones that hung in the briefing room during the rollout, used the phrase decision superiority. The system is built on a large multimodal model, fine-tuned on classified intelligence feeds. It can read 1,000 pages of intercepts in under a second. It can analyze video from any source and tell you if a foreign leader is in a bunker or on a beach. It can compare a voice recording against a library of known voices and tell you, with a percentage, whether it is real. Hannah likes Sentinel. She would not say so out loud, but she does. The morning briefings used to come down from the wing intelligence shop as thick paper packets, full of jargon and stale photos. Now they arrive as a tidy summary on her screen, with the important parts already highlighted. It saves her 20 minutes. It lets her finish her coffee while it is still hot. She has no reason that March morning to look at Sentinel and feel anything other than mild gratitude. The screen flickers on. The summary loads. Threat level low. Confidence 96%. Nothing unusual along the Russian border. Nothing unusual in the Pacific. A quiet night ending in a quiet morning. Hannah leans back in her chair. Daniel cracks a joke about the coffee. Somewhere above them, the wind moves over the wheat. The missiles wait in their silos as they have waited for 60 years. And Sentinel watches tirelessly, exactly as it was built to. To understand what changed, you have to understand how it used to work. Not in the movies, in real life. In the rooms with the bad coffee and the humming fluorescent lights. For most of the Cold War, and for the long, quiet decades after it, the early warning system at Cheyenne Mountain ran on a simple idea. A machine could see, but only a person could decide. The sensors did the watching. Satellites in geosynchronous orbit, phased array radars in Alaska, in Greenland, in Massachusetts, sonar nets under the Pacific. They fed data into a network the Air Force called the Integrated Tactical Warning and Attack Assessment System. It was old. It worked. When something appeared on the screens, a missile warning officer would log it. The officer's job was not to react. The officer's job was to call. There was a phone on the desk, a heavy beige handset, and that phone connected to other phones, and those phones connected to more phones. And at the end of the chain, there was always a human voice asking another human voice, "Are you sure?" The protocol had a name. They called it dual phenomenology. It meant that before anyone moved a single piece on the board, two different kinds of sensors had to agree. A satellite saw the heat plume. A radar saw the object. Only then did the warning become real. If only one sensor saw it, the warning was filed as ambiguous. Ambiguous warnings were studied, not acted on. There were forms for everything. A missile event conference convened over a secure line. A threat assessment conference convened if the event looked credible. A missile attack conference convened only if the assessment held. Each step required named officers by call sign, by voice, by clearance. Each step bought time. Time was the whole point. The system was slow on purpose. Slow meant a junior officer could turn to a senior officer and say, "Sir, I want a second look at this." Slow meant a watch commander could lean back in her chair and say, "Get me the analyst who wrote the original assessment on this radar return from 1987, because I remember something like this." Slow meant that when Stanislav Petrov sat at his console in 1983 and watched 5 American missiles appear on his screen, he had enough seconds to think. 5 is not how they would do it. And he had enough authority to pick up the phone and say, "This is a false alarm." Petrov was a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Defense Forces. The screen told him to launch. He did not. He was right. The sun had glinted off high-altitude clouds in a way the satellite had never seen before. The machine had no concept of clouds. Petrov did. Hannah Voss had read about Petrov in officer training. Everyone had. He was the patron saint of the watch floor. There was a small printed quote of his on the corkboard near the coffee maker. I had a funny feeling in my gut. He had told an interviewer years later. I didn't want to make a mistake. The old protocols were built for people like Petrov. They were built around the funny feeling in the gut. They assumed the machines would be wrong sometimes, and they assumed the humans would catch it. It was not a clean system. It was slow, and it was inconsistent, and sometimes it was unjust. Officers had their careers ruined for raising alarms that turned out to be nothing. Officers had been quietly transferred for failing to raise alarms that turned out to be something. Promotions hinged on the judgment of colonels who had not sat a watch in 15 years. There were rivalries between the satellite people and the radar people. There were arguments about which kind of evidence counted more. But there was also always somebody you could talk to. If the sensor said one thing and your gut said another, you could call your watch commander. Your watch commander could call the duty general. The duty general could call SDRATCOM. SDRATCOM could call the White House Military Office. At every link in the chain, a person was answering. A person could be reasoned with. A person could be wrong, and a person could be persuaded. That was the world before. A world of beige handsets and named officers and forms with carbon copies. A world where the worst weapons humans had ever built were held back every single day by a tradition of pausing. Hannah had served in that world for almost 10 years. She had learned its rhythms. She had trusted them. She did not yet know how quickly a tradition can be replaced by a piece of software. The memo arrived in Hannah's inbox on a Tuesday in early spring. The subject line was plain: Sentinel integration. Phase 1 begins April 14. She read it standing up, coffee in one hand, badge still clipped to her jacket from the drive-in. The body of the email was 4 short paragraphs. It used the word modernization twice. The system had a name now: Sentinel. The Department of Defense had selected a contractor, a partnership between a large defense firm and a Silicon Valley AI lab, to deliver what the press release called Next Generation Threat Assessment and Signal Verification. The phrase appeared in bold near the top of the announcement. Hannah read it twice. She had been waiting almost a year for this email. The official rollout was covered in the trade press the same week. Defense News ran a short piece. Breaking Defense ran a longer one. The headline on the longer one said, Pentagon greenlights AI verification layer for strategic command. A photograph showed a clean server room 3 people in suits shaking hands. None of the 3 people had ever worked a night watch. The contractor's CEO gave a quote that ended up in almost every story. He said Sentinel would reduce human decision latency by up to 70%, while increasing confidence in flagged anomalies. He said the system had been trained on decades of declassified signal data and the largest synthetic threat library ever assembled. He said it would free our warfighters from the cognitive load of false positives. The phrase cognitive load struck Hannah as strange. She had never thought of her job that way. The Pentagon's own statement was shorter and more careful. It described Sentinel as a decision support tool that would augment, not replace, existing verification protocols. It mentioned the savings, almost $2 billion over 10 years, and the staffing efficiencies. It mentioned faster response times in a contested electromagnetic environment. It did not mention what the system would actually do when something came in that looked real but wasn't. Hannah's commanding officer held a briefing on a Thursday. The room held about 30 people. He stood in front of a slide that said Sentinel, Phase 1, in clean blue letters. He told them the system would be running in parallel with existing protocols for the first 6 months. It would observe. It would flag. It would not act. Then, after evaluation, it would be promoted to what he called first-line verification status. After that, the senior watch officer would still sign off on every escalation. Nothing was being taken away from them, he said. They were being given a faster set of eyes. A few hands went up. One of the analysts, a woman named Rivera, asked how the system handled spoofed audio. The commanding officer said the contractor had addressed that in the technical documentation. He said the verification model was robust against known deepfake vectors. Rivera wrote something down and didn't ask a follow-up. Hannah didn't ask a question. She wanted to. She thought about the old protocols, the ones she had memorized in her first year. The callbacks, the 2-person rule, the cross-channel confirmations that had been written into doctrine after the close calls of the 1980s. She thought about Stanislav Petrov, the Soviet officer who in 1983 had looked at 5 incoming missiles on his screen and decided on instinct the system was wrong. He had been right. She had read about him in training. Every officer in the room had. After the briefing, she walked back to her station and read the technical summary the contractor had provided. It was 40 pages. Most of it was performance metrics. There was a section near the back called Known Limitations. It was a page and a half. It used the word edge cases 4 times. It mentioned that the system had been tested against a representative sample of adversarial audio and video inputs and had performed above benchmark. It did not say what the benchmark was. The integration began on schedule. On April 14th, a team of contractors arrived in unmarked vehicles and spent 2 days running cables and updating consoles. By the end of the second day, a new pane had appeared on Hannah's screen. It was small, tucked into the lower right corner. It showed a green dot and a single word, Sentinel. Below that, in smaller letters, the status read nominal. She stared at it for a long time on her first shift back. The dot pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. Everything in the room looked exactly the same as it had the week before. That was the part she would remember later. How ordinary it all looked. How quietly the new thing had taken its place beside the old ones. In the first weeks, Sentinel did exactly what the briefing slides had promised. Hannah noticed it on her 3rd night shift after the rollout. A signal came in from a listening post in the Arctic. In the old days, that signal would have taken 9 minutes to confirm. 2 analysts cross-checking. A satellite retasked. A phone call to a duty officer who would yawn and reach for his glasses. Sentinel did it in 41 seconds. A clean green tag. A short summary written in plain English. A confidence score of 97%. Background flight. No threat. Hannah read the summary twice. Then she read it a 3rd time, just to be sure. It was correct. The colonel walked through the watch floor that morning with a paper cup of coffee and a small, satisfied smile. He stopped behind Hannah's chair and looked at her screen. He didn't say anything. He just nodded once and moved on. The numbers came out the following Monday. The command's internal bulletin ran them on the front page. Median time to threat classification was down 68%. False positives were down 44%. Analyst overtime was down by almost a third. The bulletin called it, in bold letters near the top, the most successful integration of machine assistance in the history of the watch floor. Hannah read the bulletin in the break room while her oatmeal cooled. She felt, for the first time in months, a small flicker of pride. The thing was working. The thing she had been afraid of was working. There was a town hall the next Friday. A general flew in. A slide came up on the big screen at the front of the auditorium. The slide had one number on it, in white type on a navy background. 97.3%. Below the number, in smaller letters, were the words, "Agreement between Sentinel classifications and post-event human review." The general spoke for 9 minutes. He said the watch floor was now the model for the rest of the command. He said 2 allied nations had already requested briefings. He said the program was, in his words, ahead of schedule and under budget, which is something I have not said in this building in 26 years. There was polite laughter. Hannah clapped along with everyone else. A trade publication called Defense Systems quarterly ran a case study the following month. The cover showed a stock photograph of a radar screen. The headline read, "Faster Eyes. How one command cut decision time in half." The article quoted the vendor's chief executive. He said the system had been trained on 40 years of declassified watch floor data, and that its accuracy now exceeded that of a fully rested 2-person analyst team on their best day. The article did not include any quotes from analysts. A management consultancy in Virginia published a white paper. The paper used words like force multiplier and decision velocity. It recommended that 2 other commands adopt the same vendor within the calendar year. Both commands announced their intentions to do so by the end of the quarter. The vendor's stock price climbed 11% in a single week. The colonel was promoted. There was a small ceremony in a conference room with sheet cake from the commissary. He gave a short speech in which he thanked the watch floor by name. He mentioned Hannah. He said she had been one of the first to embrace the new tools. Hannah, sitting in the second row in her dress uniform, felt her face grow warm. She smiled and looked down at her hands. Someone posted a photograph of the cake on a professional networking site. The caption read, "Proud to be part of a team building the future of strategic defense." It received 412 reactions. No one objected. There was nothing to object to. The shift logs were cleaner than they had ever been. The senior analysts, the ones who had grumbled in the early weeks, had started to relax. They had started to trust the green tags. They had started to clear them with a single click and move on to the next signal. Hannah trusted them too. She had watched Sentinel classify thousands of signals, and she had not yet seen it make a single mistake she could prove. The system was not yet wrong. By every measure the command was tracking, it was exactly what had been promised. That was the most important fact about those months. Not that anyone was lying. Not that anyone was hiding anything. The system was good. The system was, in plain measurable terms, better than what had come before. And so the watch floor learned, gently and without ceremony, to believe it. It happened on a Tuesday. The kind of shift where the coffee tasted burnt and the heater clicked on and off for no reason Hannah could figure out. She was 3 hours into watch. The screens glowed their familiar blue. Sentinel had flagged 2 routine items already, both cleared, both filed. Then the audio packet came in. It was tagged as an intercept from a foreign military channel. A general's voice, speaking in a language Hannah did not know, translated in real time across the bottom of her screen. Sentinel rated the authenticity at 96%. The transcript scrolled out clean and confident. Troop movements, a name, a location. Hannah leaned forward. She put her headphones on. She played the clip again. Something in the voice was off. She could not say what. The words landed in the right order. The pauses fell where pauses should fall, but the breath between sentences felt wrong. Too even, like a person who had never been nervous in their life. She played it a third time. The general had spoken at a press conference 6 months ago. Hannah had reviewed that footage during training. She remembered the man clearing his throat twice. She remembered him stumbling over a long word and laughing at himself. The voice in her ears now did neither of those things. The voice in her ears was perfect. She tapped her pen against the desk. She thought about how tired she was. She thought about how Sentinel had been right about 100 other things this month. 96% was a high number. 96% was almost certain. Still, she turned to her left. Sergeant Marcus Doyle was sitting 2 stations over, eating an apple and scrolling through a maintenance log. He had been on night watch longer than she had. He had the kind of face that did not get surprised by much. "Hey, Marcus," he looked up. "Yeah, you got a second?" He set the apple down. He rolled his chair across the floor and stopped beside her. She handed him a spare headset. She pulled up the file. "Listen to this," she said. "Tell me what you think." He listened. His eyes were closed. He nodded once, slowly. When the clip ended, he opened his eyes and shrugged. "Sounds like him," he said, "does it?" "I mean, yeah. Why?" She tried to find the words. "The breathing," she said. I don't know. It's too smooth. He doesn't sound like he's been running. He doesn't sound like he's been doing anything." Marcus smiled a little. "Maybe he hasn't. Maybe he's sitting in a chair. Maybe." Sentinel rated it at what? 96. He gave a low whistle. "That's a pass. That's a clean pass." "I know." He looked at her face. He had the kindness in him to take her seriously, even when he didn't agree. He scratched his jaw and thought about it. "Look," he said, "there's been a couple of weird ones this month. I heard the day shift had one where the system flagged a civilian flight as a bomber. Cleared in about 40 seconds, but still, they're tuning it. Edge cases. That's what they call them upstairs. Edge cases. Yeah. Stuff the model hasn't seen enough of. Synthetic voices, compressed audio, bad whether over the satellite. They've got a team looking at it. Some contractor out of Virginia, I think. So what do I do?" He shrugged again. "Log it. Flag it for review. Move on. If you escalate every 96, you'll be writing memos till sunrise." She nodded slowly. He was right. She knew he was right. The protocol said anything above 95 was confirmed unless contradicted by a second source. There was no second source. There was just a feeling in her chest. "Okay," she said, "you good? I'm good." he rolled back to his station. He picked up the apple. He kept reading the maintenance log. Hannah sat there for another minute. She played the clip one more time, quieter now. The volume turned low, so it would not draw attention. The voice spoke its careful sentences. The breath came at its even, perfect intervals. She listened to it the way you listen to a song you used to like and now do not trust. Then she clicked the confirm button. She typed a short note in the review field. Audio quality unusually clean. Worth flagging for QA. She saved it. She closed the file. She drank her coffee. It was cold now. The shift kept moving. 2 more flags came in, both routine, both cleared. By the time her replacement walked through the door at 6, Hannah had stopped TH. The second briefing came 9 days after the first. Hannah was on the same shift, same chair, same chipped mug of black coffee. The voice on the feed belonged to a forward commander she had heard 100 times before. The cadence was right. The clearance codes were right. But there was a small pause before he said the word coordinates, and the vowel inside it sat a little too flat. She flagged it. She wrote in the log that the audio quality seemed degraded. That was the language they used. Degraded. Not wrong. Not fake. Just degraded, like a bad phone line. The third briefing happened 11 days after that. This time, it was a satellite feed showing troop movement near a contested border. Hannah watched a column of vehicles cross a road, and something about the shadows didn't match. The light was coming from one direction. The shadows leaned another. It was the kind of thing you would only notice if you had spent 6 years staring at this exact kind of footage at 3 in the morning. She started a list in the Notes app on her phone. She titled it Odd. Under it, she wrote 3 entries, each one short. A voice that hummed wrong. An audio pause in a familiar name. Shadows that pointed the wrong way. She did not know the words for what she was seeing. She had never heard the term generative model. She did not know that the system her base relied on, Sentinel, used a verification pipeline built on top of a commercial foundation model from a vendor in Virginia. She only knew the feeling. The feeling was old. The feeling was something is wrong. She started taking screenshots. She saved them to a folder on her desktop and named the folder Training Notes because that sounded like something nobody would ask about. She printed one of them and stuck it to the side of her monitor with a yellow sticky note. On the sticky note, she wrote a single word: check. After her fourth shift, she went to see Major Reyes. Reyes was 46, friendly, the kind of officer who remembered the names of your kids. His office had a small fern in the corner that he watered with a measuring cup. Hannah sat across from him with her phone in her hand and the list open on the screen. She told him about the voice. She told him about the shadows. She told him about the pause before the word coordinates. She told him she didn't know what it meant, but she had been doing this work for 6 years, and she could feel something was off. Reyes listened. He nodded at the right times. He let her finish. Then he said, "Voss, I appreciate you bringing this to me. I really do. That's exactly the kind of attention to detail we want." He smiled. "But I want you to think about something. Sentinel runs 90,000 verifications a week. 90,000. And you're describing 3 over the course of a month. 3 out of, 1,200 you've personally reviewed." He paused, the way men pause when they are about to be gentle with you. The system flags its own anomalies. It runs a confidence score on every feed. If those briefings had failed verification, you would have seen the alert. You didn't see the alert, which means the system checked and the system was satisfied. Hannah said the shadows didn't match. Reyes nodded again. Shadows are tricky. Atmospheric distortion. Compression artifacts. The feed comes through 3 satellites and 2 relay stations before it gets to your screen. There are 1,000 reasons a shadow might look funny. He leaned back in his chair. "Look, I'm going to be honest with you. We've had some folks lately who get a little fixated on the new system. It's new, it's strange, it makes them uncomfortable. That's natural. But you have to trust the architecture. The architecture has been validated by people whose entire job is validation. You and me, we run the watch. We don't run the model." He smiled again. The fern in the corner caught the light. "Keep your eyes sharp. That's what we need from you. But don't go chasing ghosts, Voss. You'll burn yourself out, and I need you on this desk." Hannah said, "Thank you, sir." She walked out of the office and down the long beige corridor with the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. She felt the phone in her pocket, heavy in a way phones are not usually heavy. She had been listened to. She had been thanked. She had been told very politely that what she had seen was not a thing. She went back to her desk. She did not delete the folder. She added a fourth entry to the list. The change came on a Tuesday. Hannah didn't notice it on Tuesday. She noticed it 11 days later on a Saturday night shift when the bunker was quiet and she had time to look at things she normally only glanced at. She was scrolling through Sentinel's confidence log. This was a sidebar most analysts ignored. It showed how sure the system was about each piece of intercepted audio, each flagged image, each translated phrase. The numbers were small and gray. They sat in a corner of the screen like a footnote. 2 weeks earlier, when Sentinel flagged something at 78% confidence, the dashboard had marked it yellow. Yellow meant a human had to verify. Yellow meant Hannah picked up the phone, called the linguistics desk, and asked for a second pair of ears. Yellow meant slow down. That Saturday, the 78% items were green. She stared at the screen for a long moment. She refreshed it. Same thing. Green meant cleared. Green meant the system had decided on its own, and the human review was now optional. A small checkbox at the bottom of each entry read, verified by Sentinel Auto. Override available. Hannah opened the release notes. She had to dig for them. They lived inside a vendor portal that required a separate login. The kind of login she had set up during onboarding and not used since. Her password had expired. She reset it. A 6-page document loaded. Version 472. Released 11 days ago. Patch notes, bullet by bullet, in small font. Halfway down the 3rd page, one line. Auto verification threshold lowered from 92% to 74% based on Q3 performance benchmarks. Manual review now optional for green tier alerts. That was the whole sentence. No bold text. No warning banner. No email to the watch floor. Just a line in a document hosted on a server she had forgotten existed. She read it 3 times. Then she read the next bullet. Anomaly flag reclassified as standard variance indicator. No operational change required. Hannah felt something settle in her chest. Not panic, something heavier. Something like the moment you realize the back door of your house has been unlocked for a week and you didn't know. She walked to the coffee station. She poured a cup she didn't want. She thought about the briefing 8 days ago, the one with the audio that sounded almost right, but not quite. She remembered checking the confidence score. 81%. She remembered seeing the green tag and thinking, well, the system cleared it. She remembered moving on. The system had cleared it because the threshold had moved, not because the audio was more trustworthy. The audio was exactly as trustworthy as it would have been 2 weeks earlier, when it would have been yellow, when she would have called the linguistics desk, when a human would have listened to the breath between the words. She sat back down at her terminal. She opened the chat channel for night shift analysts. She typed a message and then deleted it. She typed another one. She deleted that too. What would she say? The vendor changed a number. The change was documented. Everyone with access to the portal could have read it. Nobody had told them not to trust the green tags. Nobody had told them the green tags meant something different now. She thought about Major Ray's, her supervisor, asleep at home. She thought about waking him to say the threshold moved. She could already hear his voice. Hannah, it's in the release notes. The vendor is the expert. The benchmarks support the change. Get some sleep. She opened the configuration log instead. She wanted to see who had approved the update on their end. The log showed an automatic deployment. A service account named Sentinel Deploy had pushed the new version at 3:14 in the morning, 11 days ago. No human signature. No approval ticket. The vendor had pushed it. The system had accepted it. The watch floor had inherited it. She found one more entry near the bottom, an internal message from the engineering liaison, posted in a channel Hannah didn't have access to. Someone had screenshotted it and pinned it to the Analyst wiki months ago for unrelated reasons. The message read, "Threshold tuning is ongoing. Expect quarterly adjustments. Watch floor will not be individually notified unless operational workflow changes." workflow is unchanged. Only the auto-clear band has widened. Only the auto-clear band has widened. Hannah read that sentence and understood with a clarity that did not feel like relief, that the rules of her job had changed without anyone telling her, and that the people who had changed them did not consider this worth a phone call. She closed. Step away from Hannah for a moment. Step away from the dim glow of the Sentinel terminal, the cooling coffee, the hum of the bunker air system. Walk out of that room and into the wider world, the one that existed before her shift began. Because what was happening to her was not new. It had a paper trail, a long one, a trail that had been sitting in public view in plain language for years. In 2019, a small startup called released a synthetic voice clone of the podcaster Joe Rogan. They published it openly. They wanted people to hear it. The clone said things Joe Rogan had never said, in a voice indistinguishable from his own. The researchers wrote a blog post warning that the technology was moving faster than the public understood. The post is still online. Almost nobody in defense circles Reddit. In 2020, the Brookings Institution published a paper titled Deepfakes and International Conflict. It described, step by step, how a forged video or audio clip of a head of state could be used to provoke a military response. It named the risk. It named the timeline. It said the technology would be operationally dangerous within 5 years. 5 years was 2025. In 2023, the RAND Corporation released a study on artificial intelligence in nuclear command and control. The study warned that integrating machine learning models into early warning systems would create a new category of failure. Not the old failure of a faulty radar or a flock of geese mistaken for missiles. A new failure, a failure where the machine produced a confident, polished, internally consistent lie, and the humans, trained to trust the machine, would have no time to catch it. The study was read by a small number of people. Most of them already agreed with it. That same year, the European Union's AI Act Working Group published a risk assessment. It listed synthetic media in defense contexts as an unacceptable risk category. category was written into the final law, but the law applied to European systems. The American defense pipeline, with its private contractors and classified programs, sat outside the frame. In early 2024, NewsGuard, a media watchdog, documented over 600 websites generating fully synthetic news content. Some of it was political. Some of it impersonated real journalists. The report noted that the cost of producing a convincing fake video had fallen by roughly 95% in 18 months. What had cost a film studio $50,000 in 2022 cost a teenager with a laptop $200 in 2024. The Center for AI Safety that same year ran a tabletop exercise with former military officers. They simulated a deepfake of a foreign leader ordering a strike. The exercise was meant to last 4 hours. It ended in 90 minutes. Every team escalated. Every team launched. Every team afterward said they had known it might be fake. And every team had launched anyway, because the protocols did not give them time to be sure. The transcript of that exercise was published. It was covered by Defense One and by Wired. It was discussed on 3 podcasts. It was forwarded inside the Pentagon to a distribution list of roughly 400 people. The open rate, according to a later audit, was under 12%. A 2024 paper out of Stanford's Internet Observatory tracked the rise of what the authors called authoritative synthesis. Not fakes meant to fool a casual viewer. Fakes meant to fool an analyst. Fakes built with the specific cadence, vocabulary, and background audio of official communications. The paper warned that defense systems trained on real intercepts would, by definition, accept these forgeries as genuine. The training data and the attack surface were the same surface. The Government Accountability Office, in a report dated September 2024, reviewed 17 defense AI procurement contracts. It found that none of them required adversarial testing against synthetic media. None of them. The report used the word concerning 11 times. It was filed. It was archived. It was, by the standards of government reports, well written. 3 reporters covered it. The story ran for a day and a half This was the public record, not classified, not buried, searchable, downloadable, free. Anyone with a library card could have read every word. And inside the bunkers, inside the briefing rooms, inside the procurement offices where the contracts got signed, almost nobody did. Not because they were careless, because they were busy, because the reports were long, because the warnings were technical, because the next briefing was always starting in 10 minutes, and the system in front of them had not failed yet. The warnings existed. They simply went unread. Step back for a moment. Step out of the windowless room where Hannah Voss sits in front of the Sentinel screen. Step out of the bunker entirely. Travel back about a year before the night of the false alarm to a hearing room in Washington. The date is July 25th, 2023. The room is wood-paneled, brightly lit, and full of cameras. Senators sit in a curved row, their nameplates catching the overhead lights. At the witness table, 3 men have been sworn in. One of them is Yoshua Bengio. Bengio is a soft-spoken man. He wears glasses. His voice has the slight accent of Montreal, where he has spent decades teaching at the Université de Montréal. He is one of the 3 researchers who won the Turing Award in 2018 for the work that made modern AI possible. The other 2 were Jeffrey Hinton and Yann LeCun. People in the field sometimes call them the Godfathers. Bengio came to the hearing nervous. He had spent the spring writing letters. He had signed a public statement in May saying that mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority. He had been losing sleep. His own daughter had asked him gently why he had spent his life building something that frightened him now. At the Senate table, he spoke carefully. He told the senators that AI systems were advancing faster than the safeguards around them. He told them that bad actors could use these systems to impersonate real people, to forge voices, to generate convincing video. He used the word destabilizing. He said the risks to democracy and to national security were not theoretical. They were close. Then he said something the transcripts preserved exactly. He said, "We don't know how many months or years separate us from the moment when humans lose control." A pause settled in the room. One senator wrote something down. Another adjusted a microphone. The hearing moved on to questions about jobs, about copyright, about regulation. The cameras kept rolling. The clip of Bengio's warning was clipped and posted and watched a few 100,000 times. Within a week, it had scrolled off the front page. Bengio went back to Montreal. He kept writing. He helped draft the International Scientific Report on the Safety of Advanced AI. He warned again and again about a specific scenario. Generative models, he said, would soon be able to imitate the voice of any leader. They would be able to produce video indistinguishable from real footage, and the institutions that made decisions of consequence, including military institutions, had not yet built the verification tools to keep up. In an interview later that year, he was more direct. He said, "If we build machines that can deceive us at scale, and we plug them into the systems that decide whether nations live or die, we are gambling with the entire future." He said this on a podcast. The host thanked him. The episode got modest numbers. In the months that followed, several governments produced reports that cited Bengio's testimony. The reports were thick and well written. They sat on shelves. A few were summarized in briefings that staffers skimmed on their phones between meetings. The phrase synthetic media authentication appeared in some procurement documents. Budget lines were drafted. Most were cut in committee. Sentinel was already in development when Bengio testified. The contractor building it had read the transcripts. Engineers inside the company circulated his quote in an internal Slack channel. One of them, a young woman who had studied under a colleague of Bengio's, added a single line to the project's risk register. She wrote, "Voice synthesis vulnerability. See Bengio testimony, July 2023. The risk register was reviewed by a project manager. The line was flagged as out of scope for the current contract phase. It was moved to a document called Future Considerations. Future Considerations was a spreadsheet with 240 entries. Nobody opened it after that. Bengio kept giving talks. He looked tired in the photographs from that year. At a conference in Geneva, someone asked him whether he thought anyone was actually listening. He thought for a moment, and then he said, "Some people are listening. I am not sure the right people are listening." He went home. He kept teaching. He kept writing letters. A year later, Lieutenant Hannah Voss would sit in front of a screen at 4 in the morning and watch a face speak words that face had never spoken. Somewhere on a shelf in a building she would never enter, a transcript of Bengio's testimony sat in a binder, the spine uncracked, the words inside still true, still patient, still waiting for someone to read them in time. His name was Daniel Ockeffer. He was 34 years old. He worked as a junior verification analyst at the Defense Threat Reduction Agency in a beige office building in Fort Belvoir, Virginia. His badge said he was a GS-12. His business cards said Senior Technical Specialist because his manager thought that sounded better when he had to email contractors. Daniel had a wife named Priya and a 2-year-old daughter named Asha. He drove a used Honda Civic with a cracked rear bumper. He packed his lunch every day because the cafeteria food gave him heartburn. He was not a hero. He was a man who liked his job because it was steady, and he liked the people in his row of cubicles. For 7 months, Daniel had been quietly reviewing Sentinel's voice authentication logs. It was not officially his job. He had been asked to audit a small subset of flagged calls back in February, and he had simply never stopped. Nobody told him to stop. Nobody told him to continue. The audits piled up on his desk like leaves nobody had raked. What he found bothered him. Sentinel's voice match scores were drifting. When the system encountered a synthetic voice trained on more than 4 minutes of public audio, it was scoring those voices as authentic about 93% of the time. The internal threshold for human verification was 95. Below that, a human analyst had to confirm. Above it, the system passed the voice through as cleared. 93 was close. Close enough that a slightly better deepfake, a slightly cleaner recording, would slide right over the line. Daniel ran the numbers 3 times. He used a different sample set. He used a different scoring window. The drift held. On the morning of September 18th, he wrote a memo. It was 4 pages long. It had a cover sheet, a table of findings, and a paragraph at the end that he rewrote 11 times. The final version of that paragraph said this: "The current verification threshold creates a foreseeable pathway by which a synthetic voice impersonating a senior command authority could be cleared without human review. I recommend immediate suspension of automated voice clearance pending recalibration." He printed 3 copies. He filed one with his direct supervisor, a woman named Carol Reyes. He filed one with the Office of the Inspector General through the internal portal, which generated a tracking number that he wrote down on a sticky note. He filed one with the Sentinel Program Office by interoffice mail in a manila envelope with a routing slip stapled to the front. The interoffice mail took 4 days to arrive at the program office. When it did, a clerk named Marcus stamped it received and put it in the inbox of a deputy program manager who was on parental leave. It sat in that inbox for 6 weeks. Carol Reyes read her copy the same afternoon. She walked it down the hall to a colleague who told her this was above their pay grade and she should kick it upstairs. Carol kicked it upstairs. The memo reached an assistant director who told his assistant to schedule a meeting for the following week to discuss it. The meeting was rescheduled twice and then quietly dropped from the calendar. The Inspector General portal generated an automatic acknowledgement. Tracking number 2024 DTRA 1108. Daniel received a follow-up email 3 weeks later saying his complaint had been routed to the appropriate office for review. He never received another email about it. He did not go to the press. He did not call a senator. He did not post anonymously on any forum. He believed in the way that career civil servants believe that the system would work if he used it correctly. He had used it correctly. He had filed in triplicate. He had followed the chain. In October, he asked Carol about the memo. She said it was being looked at. In November, he asked again. She said the program office had it. In December, she stopped meeting his eyes when he brought it up, and he stopped bringing it up. That winter, Daniel and Priya took a chav to see Christmas lights in a park near their house. A chav pointed at every bulb and laughed. Daniel held her in one arm and Priya's hand in the other, for a few hours, he did not think about voice scores or thresholds or manila envelopes sitting in inboxes. The memo, all 3 copies of it, still existed. They sat in folders and drawers and digital cues across 3 buildings in Northern Virginia. Each one was perfectly preserved. Each one was perfectly ignored. Daniel had done exactly what he was supposed to do, and it had changed exactly nothing. He went back to work in January, and the audits kept piling up. The memo sat in the system for 9 days before Hannah did anything else about it. She kept checking the tracking number. The status stayed the same. Received, under review, no name attached, no timeline. On the 10th day, she went to see Major Ellison in person. His office was on the 2nd floor, near the vending machines. Hannah waited in the hallway for 40 minutes. When he finally waved her in, he was already looking at his watch. She told him about the voice, about the 3 briefings, about the memo. He listened. He nodded in the right places. When she finished, he leaned back and folded his hands. "Voss," he said, "I appreciate you bringing this up the right way." Then he told her the vendor contract was clear. Sentinel's audit logs were proprietary. The base couldn't open them without a formal request through the procurement office. Procurement was backed up 6 months. He suggested she trust the system that her superiors had already vetted. She left his office with a dry mouth. 2 days later, she went to the legal liaison. A civilian woman named Reyes, with kind eyes and a desk full of binders. Reyes listened for 10 minutes and then held up a hand. "Lieutenant," she said gently, "anything you tell me about classified system performance falls under your NDA. If I write it down, I have to log it. If I log it, it goes to a review board. The review board will ask why you didn't go through your chain of command first." Hannah said she had gone through her chain of command. Reyes smiled, the way a doctor smiles before bad news. "Then there's nothing else I can do from this desk." Hannah tried the Inspector General's hotline that night. She called from her personal phone in her car, in the parking lot behind the commissary. The recording asked her to leave a name and a callback number. She left both. No one called back. Not the next day. Not the next week. She called a second time. The recording was the same. On the third try, a human picked up. A tired man named Paul. He took her statement. He asked clarifying questions. He told her the IG could only investigate misconduct by individuals, not the performance of approved systems. For system complaints, she would need to file with the Defense Innovation Office. He gave her a number. The number connected to a voicemail that was full. She drove home that morning and sat in her kitchen with the lights off. The next person she tried was a reporter, a defense correspondent at a national paper, someone whose byline she trusted. She used a burner email she set up at the library. She kept the message vague. She said she had information about a verification problem in an automated threat system. She did not name Sentinel. She did not name the base. The reporter wrote back within an hour. The reply was polite and careful. They would need a verified identity. They would need documents. They would need a second source. Without those, the paper's lawyers would not let the story move. The reporter wished her luck and meant it. She tried a lawyer next, a man in town who handled military whistleblower cases. He sat across from her in a small office that smelled like old coffee. He listened to everything. Then he told her the truth. You can file under the Military Whistleblower Protection Act, he said. It's a real law. It has real teeth in theory. In practice, the investigation will take 18 months to 2 years. During that time, your clearance will likely be suspended pending review. You'll be reassigned. You may be moved off the watch floor entirely. The system you're worried about will keep running the whole time. He paused. I'm not telling you not to do it. I'm telling you what it costs. She thanked him and walked out into the parking lot and sat in her car for a long time. She tried her congressman's district office. A staffer took her information and promised a call back. She tried the state AI Oversight working group she'd read about. It turned out to be a committee that had not met in 14 months. She tried a researcher at a university who studied automated warning systems. The researcher was on sabbatical until spring. 12 calls, 12 doors, not one of them slammed. Every single one closed gently for a reason that made sense on paper. Liability, jurisdiction, procedure. budget, contract, process. Nobody was the villain. That was the part that kept her awake. The machine of oversight was working exactly the way it had been built to work. And Sentinel kept running. Every night, every shift, every voice it generated, trusted by someone. Step away from the watch floor for a moment. Step out of Hannah's chair, out of the bunker, out of the hum of cooling fans and the smell of stale coffee. Walk instead into a quieter room, a records room, the kind with gray filing cabinets and a single overhead light. Inside one of those cabinets sits a red folder. The folder is real. The dates inside are real. And the dates are what matter. The first warning came 14 months before the night Hannah sat down for her shift. It came from a junior research engineer at the contractor that built Sentinel. Her name does not matter for this story. What matters is the email she sent on a Tuesday afternoon in March. The subject line read, "Synthetic audio detection. False negative rate higher than reported." The body was 4 paragraphs long. She wrote that the model flagged real voices as fake about 3% of the time. She wrote that the model flagged fake voices as real about 11% of the time. She wrote that the second number had not been shared with the customer. Her manager replied within the hour. The reply was 2 sentences. "Let's discuss offline. Please do not put numbers like these in writing going forward." That email surfaced later in a congressional subpoena. It is now part of the public record. 2 months after that, an internal review deck was prepared for the contractor's leadership. Slide 11 was titled "Known Limitations." It listed 4 items. The 4th item read, "Adversarial synthetic audio of named heads of state has not been adequately tested. Recommend delaying integration with command channels until Q4. The deck was presented on a Thursday. By the following Monday, slide 11 had been removed. The version shown to the customer had only 3 items on the limitations slide. The original deck was recovered from a shared drive during discovery. In June, a product manager opened an internal ticket. Ticket number 4471. Title: Voice Verification Fallback manual confirmation step removed in latest build. Priority, medium. The ticket sat open for 9 days. Then someone marked it resolved with a comment that read, "Per leadership, manual step adds latency incompatible with response time targets." Closing. The ticket was reopened twice by other engineers. It was closed both times within hours. In August, a senior analyst inside the defense agency itself wrote a memo. The memo was 3 pages. It went to her supervisor and to her supervisor's supervisor. The memo argued that Sentinel's confidence scores were being treated as verification rather than as estimation. She used a specific phrase. She wrote, "We are substituting a probability for a fact." The memo received a formal response 16 days later. The response thanked her for her diligence and noted that her concerns would be reviewed at the next quarterly oversight meeting. The next quarterly oversight meeting was postponed, then postponed again. It had not yet been held on the night Hannah took her seat. In October, a Slack channel inside the contractor lit up after a red team exercise. A tester had generated a synthetic clip of a foreign minister using 12 seconds of public audio. Sentinel rated the clip as authentic with a confidence of 94%. One engineer wrote, "This is the thing we said would happen." Another wrote, "Who do we tell?" A third wrote, "We already told them." The channel went quiet for the rest of the afternoon. Those messages were later printed and entered as exhibits. In November, the contractor's chief technology officer sat for a deposition in an unrelated lawsuit. He was asked, under oath, whether he was aware of limitations in voice authentication systems sold to government clients. He answered, "I am aware of the general state of the field." He was asked whether he was aware of specific limitations in his company's product. He answered, "I would need to consult with my team before answering that question." He never followed up. In December, an oversight board was supposed to convene. It did not. The minutes from that non-meeting consist of a single line: "Quorum not reached, rescheduled." In January, an inspector general's office opened a preliminary inquiry. The inquiry was assigned a case number. it was assigned a lead investigator. The lead investigator requested documents. The documents were provided partially on a rolling basis. The inquiry remained in its preliminary phase on the night the alert came in. This is what the record shows. Not a conspiracy, not a cover-up in any cinematic sense, just a sequence of small refusals, a sentence removed from a slide, a ticket closed, a meeting rescheduled, a memo thanked and shelved. The red folder existed. It was in the vault, and the dates inside it all came before. The red folder existed. The findings were real. And then nothing happened for a long time, in the way that nothing happens inside large organizations. Not because anyone decided nothing should happen, because the next step was always one meeting away, and that meeting kept moving. The first delay was reasonable. The safety review was scheduled for the second quarter. A senior reviewer had surgery. The review slipped to the third quarter. That kind of thing happens in every office in the world. Hannah was not even aware of it. She was on the night rotation, scanning her screens, watching Sentinel flag, and clear, and flag, and clear. In the third quarter, the review was on the calendar again. Then the contractor who had drafted the original audit framework lost his clearance over an unrelated paperwork issue. His replacement needed to be read in. Reading in took 6 weeks. By the time the new reviewer had access, the quarter was almost over. The review moved to the fourth quarter. A short email went out. Most people who received it did not open it. There was a board meeting in October where the Sentinel concerns appeared on the agenda. Item 9, under ongoing evaluations. The meeting ran long. Item 7 took 90 minutes because of a procurement dispute. Item 8 involved a personnel matter that required the room to be cleared and then refilled. By the time they reached item 9, 3 members had left for flights. The chair, a careful man who did not like making decisions with a half-empty room, moved items 9 and 10 to the next quarter's docket. He made a note in his own handwriting to follow up. The note went into a binder. The binder went onto a shelf. In November, the office that would have conducted the technical audit lost 2 of its 4 analysts to a hiring freeze. the freeze was not aimed at them. It was a department-wide measure tied to a continuing resolution in Congress. The 2 remaining analysts were assigned to a higher priority review of a different system. Their supervisor sent a memo upward explaining that the Sentinel audit could not be completed on the current timeline. The memo was acknowledged. No alternative was proposed. Around the same time, a reorganization began. The working group that had first raised the voiceprint concerns, the small interagency body that included Marcus Reyes and 4 others, was folded into a larger coordination office. The new office had a broader mandate and a smaller staff. The Sentinel file was supposed to transfer with the working group. In the transfer, it was logged under a new tracking number. The old tracking number was retired. Anyone searching the old system for updates found nothing. Anyone searching the new system did not know to look because the file had been renamed. Marcus tried a few times to find where his memo had gone. He called the coordination office. A pleasant woman told him the matter was under review. He asked who was reviewing it. She did not know. She said she would find out and call him back. She did not call him back. He did not blame her. She had 400 files and 1 phone. A junior staffer at the Oversight Committee noticed in January that the Sentinel item had not been discussed in 2 consecutive meetings. She flagged it to her supervisor. Her supervisor said he would raise it. He meant to. He had a daughter who was sick that month, and a confirmation hearing he was preparing materials for, and a small fire in his own department involving a leaked draft. He did not raise it. He thought about it sometimes on his drive home and told himself he would handle it next week. This is how it goes. Not with malice, not with conspiracy, with surgeries and continuing resolutions and reorganizations, and sick daughters and binders on shelves. The thing everyone agreed needed to happen was always the thing that could happen next month, because this month was already full. Sentinel kept running. It flagged voices. It cleared voices. It got faster. The engineers tuned it. The vendor pushed an update in February that improved its confidence scoring. The update was not reviewed by the safety team because the safety team was still waiting to be reconstituted under the new office. The update went live on a Tuesday. Nobody outside the vendor read the release notes carefully. Hannah, in her chair, watched her screens. She did not know about the red folder. She did not know about the binder. She did not know that the review that would have changed her job had been quietly moved 4 times to a quarter that had not yet arrived. The months passed. The silence held. The first reporter found the story by accident. Her name was Myril Chen, and she covered defense procurement for a trade publication called Jane's Defense Weekly. She was looking into something else entirely. A routine cost overrun on a satellite contract, when a source mentioned, almost as an aside, that there had been some software issues with the new threat assessment platform. She wrote it down on a yellow pad. She circled it twice. She made 3 phone calls that afternoon. The first 2 went nowhere. The third was to a Middleville staffer at the contractor, a man who had been at the company 11 years and was 4 months from retirement. He told her carefully that he could not comment, but that she might want to ask about Sentinel's voice authentication module. He said the words slowly. The way a person says something they want remembered. Myril filed her query the next morning. By noon, the press office had a draft. By 3, the draft had been through legal twice. By 5, the statement went out. It was 4 paragraphs long. It opened with the words, "We take the integrity of our defense systems with the utmost seriousness." It noted that the company was committed to the continuous improvement of all deployed platforms, and that Sentinel had performed in accordance with operational parameters across the vast majority of engagements. It said that the company cannot comment on specific operational matters, but that any concerns raised through proper channels were reviewed promptly by our internal assurance team. It ended with a line about the company's long-standing partnership with allied defense forces and its unwavering dedication to national security. The word deepfake did not appear. The word error did not appear. The phrase voice authentication did not appear. The phrase that did appear twice was isolated incident. Hannah read the statement on her phone the next evening, sitting on the edge of her bed in her quarters. She had just come off a 12-hour shift. Her boots were still on. She read it once. She read it again. She set the phone face down on the blanket and looked at the wall. She recognized nothing in it, not the briefings, not the voice that had sounded almost right, not the analyst who had filed the memo, not the 12 phone calls that had gone nowhere, not the red folder she now knew existed somewhere in a vault she would never see. The statement described a company she did not work near, a system she did not operate, a problem she did not have. And yet, every sentence was, in some narrow legal sense, true. That was the part that made her stomach turn. They had not lied. They had simply chosen which truths to say. The statement landed exactly where it was meant to land. Janes ran it the next morning, embedded in a 400-word piece under the headline "Contractor addresses reported concerns over threat platform." Defense News picked it up the same afternoon, almost word for word. Breaking Defense ran a shorter version, footnoting the original. 3 publications, 1 voice. The story had now been told in the institution's tongue, and the institution's tongue was calm. A week later, a regulator at the Government Accountability Office filed a routine quarterly report. In a footnote on page 241, the statement was cited as evidence that the contractor had publicly acknowledged and addressed the matter. The footnote did not say what the matter was. It did not need to. The citation itself was the closure. 11 days after that, the company held its quarterly earnings call. An analyst from a mid-size investment bank asked, near the end of the call, whether recent reporting on Sentinel might affect future contract awards. The chief executive answered smoothly. He said the company had addressed the matter transparently, and that customer confidence remained strong. He used the phrase "isolated incident" once more. The stock closed up 1.5%. Hannah watched a clip of the earnings call on her laptop 2 days later. The CEO was wearing a navy suit. His tie was the color of a calm sea. He smiled at the right moments. He said the right words. And somewhere in a vault, the red folders sat in the dark. And somewhere in a server room, Sentinel kept listening. And somewhere in her chest, Hannah felt the small, cold weight of understanding that the story had already been written without her. The institution had spoken. Its voice was reasonable. Its voice was steady. Its voice was the only voice anyone outside the room would ever hear. She closed the laptop. She did not sleep that night. There was supposed to be a board. It had a name: the Joint Artificial Intelligence Oversight Committee. 12 members, 3 from the Department of Defense, 2 from the intelligence community, 2 from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, 1 from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, 4 civilian experts appointed for 2-year terms. The committee was created by a directive signed in the spring. It had a charter. It had a budget line. It had a meeting room on the 3rd floor of a building in Arlington with a long table and 12 chairs and a secure phone in the corner. The committee was required to meet once every 90 days. In the first year, it met twice. In the second year, it met once. By the time Sentinel came online, the committee had not met in 14 months. There were reasons. There were always reasons. 3 of the 4 civilian seats were vacant. The nominees had been waiting for Senate confirmation for over a year. The paperwork was sitting in a stack on a staffer's desk in the Russell Building, behind 400 other names. The chair of the committee had retired. The vice chair had taken a position at a private firm. The acting chair was a deputy assistant secretary who already held 3 other titles and answered to 2 undersecretaries who did not always agree. So the meetings did not happen, and the reviews did not happen, and the risk assessments piled up in a shared folder that nobody opened. There was supposed to be an external audit. The directive required it. Once a year, an independent auditor would review the system's performance, its error rates, its training data, its failure modes. The audit would be filed with the committee. The committee would discuss it. Recommendations would follow. The auditor was selected through a competitive bidding process. The contract went to a large consulting firm in Northern Virginia. The firm had deep experience in defense systems. It also had another contract, signed 18 months earlier, to provide engineering support to the vendor that built Sentinel. two contracts were held by different divisions of the same firm. A wall existed between them. The wall was described in a memo. The memo was 3 pages long. It used the phrase robust internal separation 4 times. The audit was completed on schedule. It was 96 pages. It found that the system was operating within expected parameters. It noted some areas for continued monitoring. It recommended no changes. There was supposed to be a public comment period. New AI systems used in national security functions were subject to a notice and comment rule published in the Federal Register. The public had 30 days to respond. The notice was posted on a Friday afternoon in late August. It was titled Proposed Implementation Guidance for Automated Threat Verification Systems, subsection 4. It was 473 pages. It contained 62 references to classified annexes that were not available to the public. 2 comments were submitted. One was from a retired Air Force colonel who suggested a typo correction on page 211. The other was from a graduate student at a university in California who wrote that the proposed verification thresholds seemed low. Her comment was 3 paragraphs. It was logged. It was not addressed in the final rule. There was supposed to be a red team, an independent group of engineers and analysts whose job was to try to break the system, to feed it bad inputs, to see what it would believe. The red team was assembled. It was given access to the system in a controlled environment. It ran for 6 weeks. It produced a 40-page report. The report identified 11 vulnerabilities. 3 were classified as high severity. 1 described in technical language exactly the failure mode that would later occur. The synthesis of voice and video, the cross-referencing of fabricated signals, the way the system's confidence score could be inflated by feeding it consistent fakes across multiple channels. The report was delivered to the program office. The program office issued a response. The response was called a risk acceptance memo. It was signed by a deputy program manager. It acknowledged the findings. It stated that mitigations were planned for a future software release. It accepted the residual risk in the interim. The memo was 2 pages. It was filed in a folder. The folder was placed in a cabinet. The cabinet was in a room that required a badge to enter. Nobody at the Oversight Committee saw the memo. The committee had not met, and so the system kept running. And the watch officers kept watching. And the chairs in the meeting room in Arlington stayed empty, pushed in neatly against the long table, waiting for a quorum that would not come. The kitchen light in Hannah Voss's apartment came on at 3:42 in the morning. She had set the timer years ago, back when she first started working nights. The bulb above the sink warmed slowly, the way old bulbs do, and the room turned a soft yellow before she even opened her eyes. She lay in bed for 1 more minute. Just 1. The blanket was heavy, and the heater clicked twice in the hallway. Outside, a single car passed on Larkspur Street, its tires making that wet sound that meant it had rained while she slept. Hannah sat up. Her feet found the slippers without looking. The left one had a hole near the toe, and she kept meaning to throw them out, and she kept not throwing them out. In the kitchen, she filled the kettle. The tap groaned the way it always did. She measured 4 scoops of coffee into the steel filter, leveled them with the back of a spoon, and tapped the spoon twice against the rim. 2 taps. Always 2. Her father had done it that way, and so did she. The coffee maker she used was old. A Mr. Coffee from a thrift store in Cheyenne, scratched along the side, with a clock that blinked 12, because she had never learned to set it. She liked that it was loud. The sputter and the hiss filled the apartment and kept her from feeling alone at this hour. While it brewed, she stood at the window. The blinds were open a finger's width. She watched the street. A cat she did not know walked along the top of a fence, and then sat down and began to wash its paw. The street lamp above it had a moth circling. Even now, even in October, Hannah poured the coffee into a mug that said World's OKAYESD Ant. Her sister had given it to her 3 Christmases ago. She added milk from the carton, sniffed the milk first, decided it was fine, and added a small spoon of sugar. She stirred 7 times. She had counted once by accident and after that it had become a thing. She carried the mug to the small table by the window. 2 chairs, though only one was ever used. On the table sat a paperback she had been reading for 2 months. A mystery set in a Scottish village. And she was almost done with it, but kept rereading the same chapter because she fell asleep at the same page each morning. She did not open the book tonight. She just held the mug with both hands and let the warmth come through. On the windowsill was a small jade plant in a clay pot. Her mother had given her the cutting 4 years ago. It had grown slow and stubborn, the way jade plants do, putting out one fat leaf every season. Like it was thinking carefully about each one. Hannah picked up the little watering can shaped like an elephant and tipped a thin stream into the soil. The water darkened the dirt in a circle. She turned the pot a quarter turn so the other side could face the lamp during the day. The clock on the stove said 3:56. She had time. She opened the fridge and took out a hard-boiled egg she had made on Sunday. She peeled it over the sink, dropping the shell pieces into the drain catch. She ate it standing up, with a small shake of salt from the blue tin, and rinsed her hands and dried them on the towel hanging from the oven handle. Her uniform was on the back of the bedroom door. She had ironed it the night before. The patch on the shoulder, the bars on the collar, the name tape that read VOS in white block letters. She put it on the way she always did. Pants first, then shirt, then belt, then boots. She tied the laces in a double knot. In the bathroom, she pulled her hair back and pinned it. She looked at herself in the mirror for maybe 3 seconds. Her eyes were tired, but they were her eyes. She turned off the light. By the door, she paused. Keys, badge, phone, the small thermos she filled with the rest of the coffee, her coat, the heavy one, because the wind off the plains came hard in October. She took one last look at the apartment before she stepped out. The lamp was still on over the sink. The jade plant sat in its damp circle. The book lay closed on the table, the bookmark a third of the way through. She locked the door behind her. The hallway smelled like someone's laundry detergent. She walked toward the stairs. We come back to the room now, the one from the beginning, the one with the long table and and the blue light from the screens, and Hannah Voss standing at her station with the headset still warm against her ear. 18 minutes to impact. That was the number on the wall. The voice on the secure line had given the authentication phrase. The face on the encrypted video feed had nodded. The Sentinel system had run its checks and posted a small green word in the corner of the display. Verified. The word looked the way it always looked. Calm, quiet, a little square of color in a sea of dark. Hannah watched the duty officer to her left pick up the red handset. She watched him speak in the short, clipped way they all spoke when the protocols took over. She watched him write something down. She watched him hand the paper to the colonel. The colonel read it. Then he read it again. Then he reached for his own line. The order was not yet what people imagine when they hear the word order. It was a preparatory message, a standby, a movement of pieces on a board that very few people in the world were allowed to see. Submarine commanders received their preliminary notice. Silo crews unlocked outer doors. A bomber wing in the upper Midwest began rolling toward a runway. None of this was the end. All of this was the beginning of the end. Hannah understood, watching the green word on her screen, that she had verified a thing that was not real. She had passed it up the chain. The chain had begun to move. Here is what had gone wrong, in plain language. The face on the video feed had been generated by a model trained on 3 years of public footage of the official it impersonated. The voice had been cloned from podcast recordings, news interviews, and a single leaked phone call from 2022. The authentication phrase had been intercepted 6 weeks earlier through a contractor's compromised laptop. The compromise had been logged. No one had read the log. Sentinel had been built to catch exactly this kind of thing. It had been trained on deepfakes. It had been tested against deepfakes. It had been certified in writing as capable of distinguishing a synthetic face from a real one with 99.6% accuracy. But the model that made the face was newer than the model that judged the face. By 11 months, the attackers had trained on Sentinel's published benchmarks. They knew what it looked for. They knew what it ignored. They had built a face that lived in the gap, and the humans in the room who had once been the final check, had spent 2 years learning to trust the little green word. Verification had become a formality. The way Hannah had felt it become a formality. The way the Analyst's memo had warned it would become a formality. The way the red folder in the vault had described, in precise detail, 8 months before this night. The consequence at ground level looked like this. In a small town in the upper Midwest, a woman named Carol, who worked at a diner near the air base, heard the bombers take off and thought it was a drill. She poured coffee for a trucker. The trucker said the planes sounded different tonight. Carol agreed and did not know why. In a control room beneath the prairie, a young captain named Ellis received his preparatory message and felt his hands go cold. He had a daughter who was 4. He thought of her face. Then he thought of the procedure. And the procedure won, because the procedure always won, because that was the point of the procedure. On a submarine in the North Atlantic, a sonar tech named Rivera watched the launch keys come out of their double-locked drawer for the first time outside of an exercise in his entire career. He was 26 years old. He noticed that his commander's hands were steady and took comfort in that, and did not know that his commander's hands were steady because his commander had decided in that moment to stop feeling anything at all. Back in Hannah's room, the colonel was on his line. The duty officer was on his. The screens were full of green words. The clock on the wall said 16 minutes now. Hannah looked at her headset. She looked at the verified tag. She looked at the colonel's back. She opened her mouth to say something. The room kept moving around her, exactly the way it had been trained to move, exactly the way the system had told it to move. And her small voice, when it came, was very quiet. The launch order went out at 4:41 in the morning. By 6, it had been rescinded. The missiles never left the silos. The deepfake was caught by a junior analyst in another country, working her own night shift, who noticed the voice print did not match a recording she had heard a week before. She picked up a phone. Someone else picked up a phone. The chain of calls moved faster than the chain of command that started it. Hannah Voss did not know any of this yet. She was still sitting at her station when the stand down came through. Her hands were on the desk. The screen in front of her showed the same Sentinel interface it had shown all night. Green text, calm fonts, a small notification that the alert had been reclassified. The relief did not arrive the way she expected. It arrived as nausea. She stood up, walked to the bathroom at the end of the corridor, and was sick into the sink. Then she washed her face and went back to her chair. Because the shift was not over, and no one had told her to leave. By 7 in the morning, the base was full of men in suits. By 9, Hannah had given her first statement. By noon, she had given her third. They took her phone. They took her notebook. They told her not to speak to anyone outside the room. The press conference happened at 2 in the afternoon Eastern Time. A 3-star general stood at a podium in front of a blue curtain and read from a single page. He used the phrase procedural irregularity. He used the phrase, "At no point was the public in danger." He did not use the word deepfake. He did not use the name Sentinel. He took 4 questions and left. The cable networks led with the story for 11 hours. By the next evening, it had slipped to the 3rd segment. By the weekend, it was gone. A celebrity divorce filled the space where it had been. The company that built Sentinel issued a statement praising the layered safeguards that had performed as designed. Their stock dropped 9% on Monday. It rebounded by Thursday. By the end of the month, it was up 2 points from where it had started. 3 class action lawsuits were filed in the first week. 1 in the Southern District of New York, 1 in the Northern District of California, 1 in the District of Columbia. The lead plaintiffs were a retired colonel, a software engineer who had worked on an earlier version of the system, and a mother whose son served at a base that would have been a counter-strike target. The filings ran to 400 pages each. The defendants moved to dismiss on grounds of national security privilege. A Senate subcommittee announced an inquiry. The hearing was scheduled for 60 days out, then postponed again. A regulator at the Department of Defense opened a formal review. The review was classified. Its existence was acknowledged in a single sentence on page 42 of an annual report published 18 months later. Hannah was placed on administrative leave with pay. She drove home at 10 in the morning in daylight, which felt wrong. The sun was very bright. She stopped at a diner she had never been to and ordered eggs she did not eat. The waitress asked if everything was all right. Hannah said yes. Her apartment was the same as she had left it. The dishes from the night before were still in the sink. The cat was waiting by the door. She fed him. She sat on the couch. She did not turn on the television. The analyst who had filed the dissenting memo, the one from Section 11, was contacted by an attorney within 48 hours. She agreed to talk. Her name appeared in a Reuters story 6 weeks later. She was no longer employed at the contractor. The official reason was a reorganization. The families on the bases that would have been struck never learned how close it had come. The information was classified at a level that did not permit notification. Some of them noticed in the months afterward that their spouses came home quieter than before. Some of them did not notice anything at all. Hannah called her sister on the third day. She did not say what had happened. She said she had been thinking about her, which was true. Her sister said she sounded tired. Hannah said she was. They talked about their mother's birthday. They made a plan to visit together. Hannah hung up and sat in the kitchen for a long time, looking at the refrigerator, where a calendar still showed the wrong month. Let me step outside the story for a moment. Lieutenant Hannah Voss is not a real person. The Sentinel system, as described in this episode, does not exist by that name. The launch in our story did not happen. No missile flew. No city burned. You can let that sit with you for a moment before we go on. But almost everything else in this story is real. Each piece comes from something that has already happened somewhere in the world in the last few years. The episode is a quilt stitched together from real incidents. The thread is the same thread every time. A synthetic voice, a trusted screen, a decision made too fast. In January of 2024, a deepfake audio recording of President Joe Biden was sent to thousands of voters in New Hampshire. The voice told them not to vote in the primary. It sounded like him. The breathing was right. The pauses were right. A consultant named Steve Kramer later admitted to commissioning it. He used a tool from a company called 11 Labs. The call cost about $1 to make. The Federal Communications Commission later proposed a $6 million fine. That same year, in Hong Kong, an employee at the engineering firm Arab joined a video call with what he believed was his chief financial officer and several colleagues. Every face on the screen was a deepfake. Every voice was synthetic. He transferred $25 million before anyone realized. Hong Kong police confirmed the details in February of 2024. The pattern is older than that. In 2019, the CEO of a British energy company wired €220,000 to a Hungarian supplier after receiving a phone call from a voice that sounded exactly like his German boss. The voice was generated by AI. The Wall Street Journal reported it that September. It was one of the first known cases of its kind. It was not the last. In 2022, a deepfake video of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky appeared online. In the video, he appeared to tell Ukrainian soldiers to lay down their arms and surrender. The video was crude. It was caught quickly, but it was broadcast briefly on a hacked Ukrainian news site, and it reached real people before it was taken down. It was the first known use of a deepfake in active wartime. The military side of the story is also real, though it is mostly told in warnings rather than disasters. In 2023, the United States Department of Defense issued updated guidance on what they called adversarial information operations, including synthetic media targeting command structures. NATO held exercises that same year simulating deepfake-driven crises. A 2024 report from the RAND Corporation warned that nuclear command and control systems were vulnerable to what the authors called deception at the speed of decision. Those are their words. The names you heard earlier in this episode are real people. Joshua Bengio testified before the United States Senate in July of 2023. Jeffrey Hinton left Google in May of that same year, so he could speak freely about the risks. Stuart Russell has spent more than a decade warning that we are building systems we do not know how to control. Their warnings are in the public record. You can read them. You can watch them deliver the words. What is fictional in our story is the specific chain of events. There is no Lieutenant Voss. There is no Sentinel. No officer in a bunker pressed a button because of a synthetic voice on a secure line. Not yet, as far as we know, but the parts that would have to be true for it to happen are already true. The tools exist. The voices can be cloned from a few seconds of audio. The faces can be rebuilt from a handful of photographs. The verification protocols inside large institutions are often slower than the speed at which a convincing fake can arrive. The oversight boards meet less often than the technology changes. The dissenting memos are filed. Sometimes they are read. Sometimes they are not. The number of people who would be affected by the event in our story is not a number we can know. A single nuclear weapon used on a city would kill, by most estimates, somewhere between 100,000 and 1 million people in the first minutes. The downstream effects, the retaliations, the breakdowns, the winters, the famines. Those numbers run into the billions in the worst modeling. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists has kept a clock since 1947. In January of 2024, they moved it to 90 seconds before midnight. That is the closest it has ever been. We are telling you a story that has not happened. We are telling it because the pieces are already on the table. Now, let's go back inside. The fork was a Tuesday, not a battlefield, not a war room. A Tuesday morning in a beige hearing room on the 4th floor of a federal office building in Arlington, Virginia. The date was March 12th, 2024. The agenda was 4 pages long. Item 7 was a procedural vote on something called the Synthetic Media Verification Rule, subsection C, paragraph 4. It was a small rule, so small that most of the people in the room had not read it. The rule would have required any artificial intelligence system used in military command chains to log every voice or video signal it ingested, and to hold those logs for 90 days. It would have required a second human outside the chain of command to be able to pull those logs at any time. No warrant, no permission slip, just access. It was not glamorous. It was paperwork. It was a button on a screen that said download. The rule had been written 18 months earlier, after a smaller incident involving a falsified naval radio transmission in the Black Sea. A working group of 14 people had drafted it. 2 of them were retired admirals. One was a researcher from MIT who had spent her career studying voice synthesis. They had argued, edited, fought over commas, and finally agreed. The rule went to committee. The committee sent it to subcommittee. The subcommittee asked for revisions. The revisions came back. The revisions went to a different subcommittee. And then, on that Tuesday morning, item 7 on the agenda, the rule came up for a procedural vote. There were 9 people in the room who could vote. 4 voted yes. 3 voted no. 2 abstained. The rule failed by 1 vote. The reason it failed was not ideological. It was not a grand argument about freedom or security. The 2 people who abstained had been told by staffers that the rule might delay a procurement contract worth $400 million. The contract was for a different system entirely, but the language of the rule one staffer had written in a memo could be interpreted to apply retroactively. That interpretation was wrong. The lawyers had said so, but the memo had gone out on a Friday, and the vote was on a Tuesday, and nobody had time to correct it. So 2 people abstained, and the rule failed, and the meeting moved on to item 8, which was about parking permits. Hannah Voss was not in that room. She had never heard of the synthetic media verification rule. On March 12th, 2024, she was at home in her kitchen making a sandwich. Her cat was on the counter. She told the cat to get down. The cat did not get down. That was her Tuesday. If the rule had passed, Sentinel would have been required to log every voice signal it ingested. The deepfake that arrived on her console months later would have left a fingerprint. A second analyst, sitting in a different building, could have pulled the log within minutes. The signal would have been flagged as synthetic before the briefing ended. The order would never have gone out. 1 vote, 2 abstentions. A memo written on a Friday by a staffer who was tired and wanted to go home. The MIT researcher who had helped write the rule learned about the vote 3 days later. she sent an email to a colleague. The email said, "We'll bring it back next session." She meant it. She was not being defeatist. She was being practical. Rules come back. Votes get reheld. That is how the system is supposed to work. The next session was scheduled for September. By September, Sentinel was operational across 3 commands. By November, the verification protocols had been quietly downgraded from mandatory to advisory. By the following spring, the briefing room was dark, and Hannah Voss was holding a phone she did not want to answer. The rule never came back. That is the part that is hard to sit with. Not that someone evil stopped it. Not that a villain crushed it. A staffer wrote a memo. 2 people abstained. The agenda moved on to parking permits. And somewhere, in a vault in a building most people will never enter, a red folder kept its secrets because no one had been given the key. This is how the worst things happen. Not in a single dramatic moment. In a Tuesday morning vote that nobody remembers. In a memo written by someone who was tired. In a rule that failed by 1 vote and was supposed to come back and didn't. The fork was not dramatic. The fork was procedural. The fork was small. That is the point. That has always been the point. There is a strange thing that happens after a quiet catastrophe. People go back through the record. They find the warnings. They line them up in order. And they see very clearly that nothing in what happened was a surprise. In May of 2023, a man named Jeffrey Hinton walked away from one of the largest technology companies in the world. He had spent his life building the foundations of modern artificial intelligence. He was 75 years old. He sat down with the New York Times, and he said, very plainly, that he had come to regret his work. He said he wanted to speak freely about the dangers, and that he could not do that while he still worked at Google. He told the reporter something that would be quoted for years afterward. He said, "It is hard to see how you can prevent the bad actors from using it for bad things." He was talking about generative AI. He was talking specifically about fakes, about images and voices and video that could be made to say anything. He said that soon, the average person would not be able to tell what was true. That was 11 months before the briefing in Hannah's bunker. In March of 2023, 2 months before Hinton spoke, more than 1,000 researchers signed an open letter. The letter asked for a pause. 6 months, they said, just enough time to put guardrails on the systems being released. Joshua Bengio signed it. Stuart Russell signed it. Elon Musk signed it. The letter said that AI labs were locked in an out-of-control race to develop and deploy ever more powerful digital minds, that no one, not even their creators, can understand, predict, or reliably control. The pause did not happen. The race continued. In July of 2023, a researcher named Haney Farid testified before Congress about synthetic media. He had spent 2 decades studying digital forgeries. He told the senators that voice cloning had become trivial. He said a 3-second sample was enough. He warned in specific words about the danger to command and control systems. He said the military would be a target. He said the financial system would be a target. He said elections would be a target. The hearing ended. The senators thanked him. No legislation followed. In the fall of 2023, an internal report circulated inside the Department of Defense. It was not classified. It was simply ignored. The report described a tabletop exercise in which a foreign actor used synthetic audio to impersonate a senior officer during a crisis simulation. The exercise ended with a launch order being issued under false pretenses. The report's final line recommended mandatory secondary authentication for all voice-based command traffic. The recommendation was forwarded for review. It sat in a queue. In January of 2024, Sam Altman, the head of OpenAI, sat for an interview. He was asked about the risks of his own technology. He said, "I'm particularly worried that these models could be used for large-scale disinformation." He paused. He said, "I am worried that they're now getting good enough that they can really influence, the course of events." 3 months later, the voice in the bunker spoke. 3 months later, Hannah Voss sat at her console and listened to a man who was not there. There is a researcher named Timnit Gebru who, in 2020, was forced out of Google after writing a paper warning about exactly these systems. The paper was called on the dangers of stochastic parrots. It said that large language models would generate convincing text without any understanding of truth. It said the harms would fall hardest on the people with the least power to push back. The paper was suppressed. Jebru was fired. The systems she warned about were deployed anyway. There is a man named Stuart Russell, a computer scientist at Berkeley, who has spent 30 years writing about the alignment problem. In 2019, in his book Human Compatible, he wrote that the danger was not robots rising up. The danger was systems doing exactly what we built them to do, while we slowly forgot how to check their work. The warnings are all there in the public record. They are not hidden. They are not coded. They were given in plain English, in newspapers and hearings and books, by people who had spent their entire lives studying these machines. They said the voices would become indistinguishable. They said the verification would erode. They said the humans in the loop would, over time, stop looking up from their screens. And when the briefing came, and the voice in the room said the words that triggered the order, no one in that bunker had read any of it. That is the part that is hardest to sit with. Picture the same room, the same hour, 4 a.m, the long fluorescent hum, the coffee gone cold in the same paper cup, Lieutenant Hannah Voss at the same console, her shift jacket draped over the same chair, the Sentinel system humming the same low hum it always hummed, ingesting the same feeds from the same satellites and the same intercept stations, threading the same audio waveforms through the same neural net. Nothing about the world is different. The same company built the system. The same procurement office signed the same contract. The same pressures pushed the same engineers to ship on the same timeline. The deepfake still arrives. The voice still sounds to the machine like the voice it was trained to recognize. The waveform still scores above the threshold the vendor said was safe. Everything is identical, up to one small thing. The dissent memo, the one the Analyst filed 11 months earlier, the one that sat in a queue behind a budget review and a parking dispute, gets read. Not celebrated, not acted on dramatically, just read by one deputy with the authority to call a meeting, who calls the meeting, who invites 2 engineers and 1 retired colonel, and who decides, after 90 quiet minutes around a conference table, that the verification step Sentinel was quietly skipping should be put back, not removed from the system, not loudly reformed, just put back. A human voice on a second line, confirming the first voice before any alert moves past the watch floor. That is the only change. The world stays the world. The company keeps its contract. Sentinel keeps its name. Hannah keeps her job and her commute and the small apartment with the loud radiator. And on this night, when the synthetic voice comes through and Sentinel raises its confidence score and the alert blooms red across her screen, Hannah does what the restored protocol now requires. She picks up the secondary line. She waits through 3 rings. A duty officer in a different building answers, sleepy, annoyed, and reads the counterphrase from a laminated card that has been in his drawer for 6 months without being touched. The phrase does not match. The voice on the original feed cannot produce it, because the model that generated the voice was never trained on a phrase that only exists on a laminated card in a drawer. Sentinel's alert is downgraded. The watch floor exhales. Someone makes a note in a log that nobody will read for years. Hannah finishes her shift. She drives home in the gray light. She does not know, will never know, that anything happened at all. That is the grief of it. In the world where the memo gets read, there is no story, no documentary, no congressional hearing, no families holding photographs on courthouse steps. Bengio is still warning. Hinton is still warning. The vendor still cuts corners on other contracts. The pressures that made Sentinel rush still exist, still push, still threaten the next system and the system after that. The world is not saved. It is only on this one night not broken, and the thing that saved it was not a breakthrough. It was a phone call, a laminated card, an analyst whose memo was read instead of filed, a deputy who chose 90 minutes of inconvenience over the convenience of trusting the machine. None of that required new technology. None of it required a new law, though a law would have helped. It required only that someone, somewhere in the chain, treated the verification step as sacred instead of optional, treated the human voice on the second line as the point, not the friction. The pieces were all there. The protocol existed. The dissent existed. The card existed. The line existed. The only thing missing was the decision to use them. That is what makes this version of the story hard to sit with. It is not far away. It is not a different civilization, or a different century, or a different set of people. It is the same room, the same hour, the same Hannah, the same coffee, with one small habit kept instead of dropped. The fork was that narrow. The fork is still that narrow tonight, in rooms we will never see, where systems we have never heard of are quietly deciding which verifications to keep and which to retire in the name of speed. Somewhere, right now, a memo is being filed. Somewhere a deputy is deciding whether to read it. The world where Hannah goes home not knowing is still reachable. It is reachable from where we are. We are simply, for the moment, choosing the other one. So that is the story. Or rather, that is one version of it. The version where the wrong voice came through at the wrong moment, and the people who could have stopped it had already learned, slowly and quietly, to stop asking questions. Hannah Voss is not a real person, but the watch floor she sat on is real. The briefing software is real. The synthetic voices are real. The memos that get filed and never read are real. The oversight boards that meet twice and then quietly dissolve are real. The pressure to trust the screen, to move faster, to clear the queue, to not be the one who slowed everything down, that is real too. It lives in hospitals and courtrooms and hiring departments and command centers. It lives anywhere a machine learned to sound certain before humans learned to stay careful. You heard this while you were falling asleep. That is all right. That is how stories like this are supposed to land. Not as alarms, not as warnings shouted across a room, just as something soft that settles in the back of your mind, the way an old song does, the way a face from a dream does. Tomorrow you might not remember Hannah's name. You might not remember the red folder, or the 12 phone calls, or the 18 minutes. But some small part of you will remember the shape of it, the feeling of a system that worked and worked and worked until didn't. That is enough. That is what these stories are for. There is nothing you need to do tonight. No petition to sign. No senator to call. No app to delete. The people who build these systems will keep building them. The people who watch them will keep watching. Somewhere right now, in a quiet room with blue light on the walls, someone is sitting in front of a screen, and the screen is telling them something, and they are deciding whether to believe it. That is happening as you breathe in. That is happening as you breathe out. You can let it happen without you for tonight. The world has always been full of fragile things held together by ordinary people paying attention. Nurses who notice, clerks who double-check, analysts who file the memo even when no one reads it, lieutenants who pick up the phone one more time. The machines are new, but the job is old. Stay awake. Stay kind. Ask the small question. That is all anyone has ever done to keep the worst days from arriving. And on the nights when you cannot stay awake, on the nights like this one, when your body is heavy and your eyes are closing and the day is finally letting you go, it is all right to rest. The watch will pass to someone else. It always does. Someone else is awake right now so that you can sleep. Tomorrow, you will be awake so that someone else can sleep. That is the quiet trade that holds the world together, and no algorithm has replaced it yet. Hannah's story ended badly in the telling, but the real story, the one still being written, has not ended. There are still rooms where someone says, wait. There are still memos that get read. There are still phone calls that go through on the second ring. Jeffrey Hinton said the thing that scared him most was that we might not notice in time. The answer to that is not fear. The answer is the small, patient practice of noticing, of staying human in rooms full of machines. You noticed tonight, that counts. So close your eyes now. Let the watch floor go dark. Let the screens dim. Let Hannah finish her coffee in a kinder version of the story. The one where the phone rings and a tired voice on the other end says, "Hold on, let me check that for you." Let the sirens stay silent. Let the morning come the way mornings usually do, slow and ordinary and full of small things. You are safe in your bed. The story is over. The light is off. Whatever tomorrow brings, it will bring it gently, and you will meet it the way you have met every other day, one careful moment at a time. Thank you for spending these hours with me. Thank you for listening, even as you drifted. It is a gift to tell a story to someone who is almost asleep. It means you trusted the voice. I will try to keep being worth that trust. Subscribe for a new AI story every night. One tap, and something fascinating is waiting for you tomorrow. Sweet dreams. A story to fall asleep to and wake up from. Sweet dreams.